Hi, I'm Kris Sandal with Live Sotheby's International Realty, and I am doing an informational series on home ownership, and we are to session 2. And the question of the day is now a good time to buy? And that is a multiple fold answer. First of all, being, is now a right time for you to buy? So I have 4 questions, and if you can answer yes to most of those questions, then you should probably be calling me and we should be having a conversation so that we can get you started. However, before you can answer that, I guess I have to give you the questions, right? So, first question is, do you have stable income? Second question would be, does home ownership fit your overall plan for your life? Third question, do you plan to be in Colorado Springs area for the next 3 to 5 years? And the fourth question is, have you started saving? Of course. There's reasons for each of those questions, and I'm going to kind of break them down a little bit just so we can understand why they might be important. So the first one is stable income. What does that mean, stable income? I'm not a lender, so I can't really say for each individual person what qualifies as stable income. But a lender, because they're going to lend you hundreds of thousands of dollars, they need to know that you have a steady flow of income, that you've been working for a period of time. They like it when you're working in a particular place for the same or for some length of time, but sometimes if you're in the same industry and you've just switch companies for whatever reason, that can all be fine. If you're military, they love that, right? Because you got steady employment, which is awesome. So that's the first question. Now, if you do not have steady employment or haven't had steady employment, or you're not sure you meet the criteria for steady employment, that's going to come into the next step, which is when you speak to that lender, and they'll be able to help you with that. And we'll come back to that in a minute. So the second thing is does home ownership fit into your overall life plan? Will it be enhancing the quality of your life? There's a lot of studies out there, and you can Google them all you want to see how home ownership impacts yourself, how it impacts if you have children, how it impacts stability in your life, how it impacts the quality of your life, how it impacts your net worth, all sorts of things. Then let's start following this because it will help you understand what needs to happen in order for you to get there. I just want to encourage everybody, if you're, a little negative Nelly in your brain saying there's no way that this can be for me, like that is simply not true. Literally millions of people buy and sell houses every single year, and there is no reason why it can't be you. Now, it might not be you tomorrow, and it might not be you in 6 weeks, and it might not be you in 6 months, but it doesn't mean that at some point it can't be you if you have a plan and a process. Now that we've covered that little lecture, we'll move on to the third point, and that was, are you planning to stay 3 to 5 years? That's a very important question. If you think you moved here, you hate it, probably not going to stay very long, buying a home is not a good plan. If you are PCSing here and maybe you're only going to be here for 2 years, something we really want to talk about. Is it a bad plan? Not necessarily, but we're going to get into detail on the how comes and what fors of that, so that it is not a negative financial decision that you make. Because if you are buying a home and you don't have the right motives and you don't have the right process going into it, it can be bad. It can be a very expensive lesson learned. And so we try to avoid expensive lessons learned. My son says stupid costs money, and he is absolutely right. And so I try to help avoid that. I try to educate to make sure that the decisions that you make are in your best interest. And of course, I don't have a crystal ball and I can't guarantee anything, but I certainly can partner with you and educate you. At the end of the day, you're responsible adults and you can make your own decisions, but it's good to make decisions with all the information that you can have before you make a decision, in my opinion. And the final thing, have you started saving? So there's some myths out there that you have to have 20% down. That is not true. There is a myth that you have to have a really high credit score. That is not true. There's cost, right? And there are programs that can help reduce the amount of money that you need for a down payment. You can get a down payment assistance. We can couple in something called seller concessions, which we'll talk about at a later date when we get into what it looks like to write an offer. But those are some myths, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't buy a house. You don't have to have thousands and thousands of dollars, but you probably should have 1 or 2,000, right? That would put you in a good position to buy a house. Now, if you don't have that, we might be having that conversation on maybe now is not, it's not today for you. Maybe it's 6 months. Maybe you're going to get another part-time gig and you're going to just squirrel away as much cash as possible for a short period of time until you have 1,000 or 2 or 3 or 5 saved, so that when you make that step into home ownership, you're not feeling the impact of the decision that you made and feeling like you're just pressed against the wall and you don't have one single penny left over, because nobody wants to be house poor. It is never my goal when clients are purchasing that they're going to be house poor. So we have lots of conversations. Not that I want to get in your business, but I have to get a little bit in your business if I'm going to help you make the best choices possible. That's the overarching 4 questions. Several things popped up where I could rabbit trail for a second, and I think I might on the lender piece. So once you've answered those 4 questions, and if you say yes, then the next needed step is to meet with that lender. Now, I have lenders that I work with that I know, like, and trust, that will get us to the closing table, because not all lenders are created equal, just like not all realtors are created equal. I'd like to offer up lenders that I feel would be a good fit for your personality, for your needs, your goals, your life. There's no pressure. I don't get a kickback. I don't get any money from my lender. That would be a RESPA violation, actually. You are free to choose whoever you want. Some people don't like picking up the old phone unless they're scrolling, but they don't like picking it up to use it as its original intention, which was to call people. If you have an aversion to that, please try to move beyond it. You can go online. You can go to a Rocket Mortgage, for instance, and you can put in all your information and they'll shoot you back a number. And they'll also potentially connect you to a realtor. But that is somebody that is paid for those leads to come to them. That might not be a good fit for your personality. They might not have the same techniques, and they might not have the same care that I would provide, for instance. While it's certainly your option to do that, there are pieces to that depending on the situation. A lot of sellers like a local lender. They don't like a big bank lender. They like to know, and me as a selling agent, when I'm selling, I like to know that I can pick up the phone and call the lender and talk to them, because at the end of the day, if there's no money, then there is no house sale. And so it is very, very, very important that you are working with somebody that's reputable, that is in it for you as well to get to the finish line. That doesn't always just happen when you're going a big bank rocket situation. Now, there are plenty of great rocket lenders. I've worked with many. That's not always the situation. That is why when you work with a realtor, that we have trusted professionals that we try and refer you to make sure that you are getting the best experience possible and that we are hitting the end result, which is to close on the home. So again, if the money doesn't show up, bad things happen and people are sad, and you didn't actually buy a house, that is not the route that we want to go. So that's the end of today's little infomercial. If you found this interesting, beneficial, helpful, I would love it if you would like, follow, subscribe, share, do all the things, because we like all the things. That's it. Thanks so much for listening. I appreciate it. If you have any questions, please drop them in. And if you feel that you've answered yes to at least 2 of the 4 questions, then please reach out. I would love to start a conversation with you and see if we can get you to step 3. Otherwise, tune in again and we will continue this series on how to buy a home. Thanks so much.